Before we begin the story, let us know where you are watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video from Soulful Narratives, please like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. A Dream. Drowning in Debt, Victoria. Hayes stood at the edge of the research dock, watching the Pacific Ocean stretch endlessly before her. The salt breeze tangled her auburn hair as she clutched the letter that would change everything. The crisp white paper trembled in her hands, not from the wind, but from the weight of the words printed on it. The Coastal Marine Research Center, her father's life work, had exactly 60 days before the bank would seize everything. 29 years old. With a doctorate in marine biology and 3 published papers on coral reef restoration, Victoria had dedicated her life to continuing her father's mission. Dr. Robert Hayes had spent 40 years studying ocean ecosystems, building this modest research center from nothing. He had passed away 2 years ago, leaving Victoria not just his dreams, but also the crushing debt from years of self-funded research. The center employed 12 people. Families who depended on their paychecks, graduate students who had given up prestigious university positions to work on meaningful conservation projects. Maria, the administrative coordinator, was a single mother of 2. Thomas, the lead researcher, had rejected offers from major corporations to stay here because he believed in the mission. Victoria walked back into the main building, her footsteps echoing in the hallway, lined with photographs of marine life. Dolphins, sea turtles, vibrant coral gardens. Each image represented a victory, a species saved, an ecosystem restored. Now all of it hung in the balance, an impossible offer. Her phone buzzed. Unknown caller. Victoria almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Miss Hayes, my name is Julian Westbrook. I would like to discuss a business proposal with you. Can we meet tonight at 7? The name stopped her cold. Julian Westbrook. Everyone knew that name. At 36, he had built Westbrook Industries into a renewable energy empire worth billions. His company developed wind farms, solar technology, and wave energy systems. He appeared in business magazines but rarely gave interviews. People called him brilliant, ruthless, visionary. What kind of proposal? Victoria asked carefully. One that could save your research center. I will explain everything tonight. The Lighthouse Restaurant. I have already made a reservation. He ended the call before she could respond. Victoria stared at her phone, her heart racing. How did he even know about her situation? The Lighthouse was an exclusive restaurant overlooking the ocean, the kind of place where powerful people made life-changing decisions. That evening, Victoria changed into the only formal dress she owned, a simple navy blue that she had worn to academic conferences. She drove her old sedan to the restaurant, feeling out of place among the expensive cars in the parking lot. The meeting. The hostess led her to a private table on the terrace. Julian Westbrook stood as she approached. He was tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, but without a tie, giving him an air of controlled casualness. Miss Hayes, thank you for coming, he said, his voice deep and measured. He pulled out her chair. You did not give me much choice with that mysterious call, Victoria replied, settling into her seat. A slight smile touched his lips. Fair point. Let me be direct. I know your research center is in debt. I know the bank has given you 60 days. I also know your work on coral reef restoration has been revolutionary. How do you know all this? Victoria asked, keeping her voice steady despite her racing thoughts. I make it my business to know about people doing important work, Julian said. Your father's research on ocean acidification influenced some of my company's environmental policies. When I heard about your situation, I saw an opportunity. What kind of opportunity? Julian leaned forward slightly. I want to marry you. The words hung in the air between them like a challenge. Victoria blinked, certain she had misheard. Excuse me? A marriage contract. 3 years. In exchange, I will pay all the debts of your research center immediately. That is $7 million. Additionally, I will fund your operations for the next 5 years and provide access to my company's resources for your conservation projects. Victoria felt the world tilt. This is insane. You cannot just propose marriage as a business transaction. Why not? Julian asked calmly. Marriage has been a business arrangement for centuries. I am simply being honest about it. I need a partner who understands environmental science, someone with genuine credentials and passion. My company is expanding into ocean-based renewable energy. I need someone by my side who can speak authentically about marine conservation. There are hundreds of marine biologists. Why me? Julian's gray eyes held hers. Because you are not doing this for fame or money. Every dollar you earn goes back into research. You live in a small apartment. You drive a 15-year-old car. You turned down a position at Stanford to stay here and continue your father's work. That authenticity is exactly what I need. The terms Victoria's mind raced. $7 million. 5 years of funding. She could save everything. Save everyone. But marriage? What would you expect from this arrangement? She asked. Attendance at business events and conferences. Professional collaboration on environmental projects. A public image of partnership. You would have complete autonomy over your research, your own financial accounts, your own space in my home if you choose to use it, and personal expectations. Victoria's face warmed as she asked. Julian's expression remained serious. I will not force anything. If intimacy develops naturally, that would be between two consenting adults. If not, we maintain professional boundaries. I am proposing a partnership, Miss Hayes, not ownership. Why do this at all? You could hire consultants. For the first time, something shifted in Julian's controlled demeanor. His jaw tightened slightly. Because everyone who approaches me wants something, my money, my connections, my name. I am tired of pretending relationships are real when they are just transactions dressed up as romance. I prefer honest transactions. Victoria studied his face. There was pain there, hidden beneath layers of control. This man had been hurt, perhaps badly. The waiter brought their meals, but Victoria barely noticed. Her mind was calculating, weighing, analyzing. 12 families. Her father's legacy. Coral reefs that would die without intervention. Against what? Her independence? Her romantic dreams? I need time, she said finally. You have 48 hours, Julian replied. After that, I have other decisions to make, other paths to pursue. They ate in relative silence, but Victoria noticed Julian watching her, not with calculation, but with something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or hope, a glimpse. Behind the mask as coffee arrived, Julian spoke again, his voice softer. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families. I grew up watching her work 16-hour days while rich people barely noticed she existed. When I made my first million, I bought her a house by the ocean. She cried for 3 hours. Victoria felt something tighten in her chest. Where is she now? Gone, heart failure 5 years ago. But she got to retire. She got to rest. He paused. Your father spent his life fighting for the ocean. That matters. People like you and him, you make the world better. People like me, we just make money. That is not true, Victoria said quietly. Your renewable energy projects prevent millions of tons of carbon emissions. You are making a difference too. Julian looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. Perhaps that is why I need you, to remind me of that. When he drove her back to the research center in his sleek electric car, the silence between them felt different, less hostile, more uncertain. 48 hours, he said as she opened the door. But Victoria, I want you to know something. If you say yes, I will treat you with respect. Always. That is my promise. Victoria nodded, unable to speak. As she watched his car disappear into the night, she stood under the stars, listening to the waves crash against the shore. 48 hours to decide her entire future. But deep in her heart, beneath all the logical arguments and careful considerations, something whispered that this decision was already made. Victoria spent the next morning in a fog of confusion and possibility. She sat in her small office at the research center, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. The letter from the bank lay on her desk like an accusation. 60 days. Now 59. She opened her laptop and typed Julian Westbrook's name into the search engine. Hundreds of articles appeared. Business magazines featured him on their covers with headlines like The Green Billionaire and Renewable Energy's Quiet Revolutionary. But the articles were all professional, sterile. They talked about his company's profits, his innovative technology, his silent dominance in the sustainable energy sector. There were no personal details. No mention of relationships, family, or life outside boardrooms. It was as if Julian Westbrook existed only as a business entity, not as a human being. Maria knocked on her door, carrying 2 cups of coffee. The administrative coordinator had worked with Victoria's father for 15 years. She was 52, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled into a practical bun. "You have been staring at that screen for an hour without moving," Maria said, setting 1 cup in front of Victoria. "What is happening?" Victoria looked up at the woman who had become like a second mother to her. "Maria, if you had a chance to save this place, but it meant sacrificing your personal freedom, would you do it?" Maria sat down slowly. "What are you talking about?" Victoria told her everything. The phone call, the meeting, the proposal. Maria listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to concern to something that looked like understanding. "This Julian Westbrook, do you trust him?" Maria asked finally. "I do not know him well enough to trust him," Victoria admitted, "but something about him feels genuine. Underneath all that control, there is something real." "Then maybe you need to find out who he really is before you decide," Maria suggested. "Not the billionaire, the man." An unexpected visit. That afternoon, a black SUV pulled up to the research center. Victoria watched from her window as Julian stepped out, wearing jeans and a simple gray sweater. She had never seen him in casual clothes. He looked younger, more approachable, almost vulnerable. She met him at the entrance. "You said I had 48 hours. It has only been 18. "I know," Julian said. "But I realized something. You are making this decision based on very little information about me. That seems unfair. So I came to offer you something." "What?" "The truth. Come with me. I want to show you who I am, not who Forbes magazine says I am." Victoria hesitated. Every logical part of her brain said this was moving too fast. But another part, the part that had always trusted her instincts, said yes. "Give me 5 minutes to tell Maria where I'm going," she said. 20 minutes later, they were driving north along the coast. Julian handled the vehicle with the same controlled precision he seemed to apply to everything. But Victoria noticed his fingers tapping lightly on the steering wheel. "A nervous habit, perhaps. Where are we going?" she asked. "To the place where everything changed for me," Julian replied. The coastal town. They arrived at a small coastal town called Briar Bay. Victoria had heard of it. 3 years ago, an oil tanker had run aground nearby, spilling thousands of gallons of crude oil into the ocean. The environmental damage had been catastrophic. Seabirds died by the hundreds. Fish populations collapsed. The local economy, which depended on fishing and tourism, was devastated. Julian parked near the harbor. The town had clearly recovered. The water sparkled clean in the afternoon sun. Fishing boats bobbed gently at their moorings. Children played on a pristine beach. Westbrook Industries led the cleanup operation here, Julian said quietly as they walked along the waterfront. "We developed new oil-dispersing technology. We hired every unemployed person in town for the restoration effort. We funded the rebuilding of the fish processing plant with sustainable practices." "I read about this," Victoria said. "The cleanup was considered one of the most successful in history. But the articles never mentioned your personal involvement." "Because I did not do it for publicity," Julian said. He stopped walking and turned to face the ocean. "I did it because my sister drowned in water like this." Victoria felt her breath catch. "Julian, I am so sorry." Her name was Claire. She was 22, studying marine biology, actually. She was on a research trip when the boat capsized. The water was thick with algae bloom from agricultural runoff. She got tangled in it, panicked, and drowned. His voice remained steady, but Victoria could see the tension in his shoulders. "I was building my first wind farm when it happened. I thought making money was enough. I thought I was doing good by creating clean energy. But I realized money means nothing if we destroy the very world we are trying to power." He turned to look at her, and Victoria saw raw pain in his gray eyes. "That is why I need someone like you. Someone who understands that every river, every ocean, every living thing in the water matters. I can build the technology, Victoria, but I need someone who can protect what the technology is meant to save." Meeting the community, Julian led her to a small community center near the harbor. Inside, a group of children were gathered around aquarium tanks, listening to a woman in her 60s explain the life cycle of sea stars. "That is Dr. Patricia Lowell," Julian said quietly. "She lost her marine biology research station in the oil spill. I funded the construction of this education center for her." Dr. Lowell looked up and her weathered face broke into a genuine smile. "Julian, you did not tell me you were coming." "Surprise visit," Julian said, and Victoria noticed how his entire demeanor softened around this woman. "Dr. Lowell, this is Victoria Hayes. She runs the Coastal Marine Research Center." "Robert Hayes' daughter," Dr. Lowell said immediately, coming forward to clasp Victoria's hands. "Your father was a brilliant man. His work on ocean acidification was groundbreaking." They spent the next hour touring the facility. Dr. Lowell showed them the touch tanks where children could interact with sea creatures, the microscope stations, the classroom where local students learned about marine ecosystems. Every few minutes, someone would stop Julian to thank him. A fisherman whose boat had been repaired, a shop owner whose business had been saved, a young woman who had gotten a scholarship to study environmental science. Julian accepted their thanks with quiet grace, but Victoria could see he was uncomfortable with the attention. This was not a man who did things for recognition. The breaking point as the sun began to set, Julian drove them to a cliff overlooking the ocean. The view was breathtaking. Golden light painted the water in shades of amber and rose. "I come here when I need to remember why I do this," Julian said. "When the board meetings and profit margins and corporate politics become too much, I come here and remember Claire. Remember that all the money in the world could not save her. But maybe it can save someone else." Victoria stood beside him, feeling the weight of his grief and purpose. "You are not doing this just for business, are you?" "The marriage proposal. You genuinely want to make a difference." "I have everything money can buy," Julian said, "but I do not have purpose shared with someone who understands. Every woman I have dated wanted the lifestyle, the status, the access to wealth. None of them cared about the work. None of them understood why I would rather fund a cleanup operation than buy another yacht." He turned to face her fully. "When I researched you, Victoria, I did not just see your credentials. I saw someone who lives in a tiny apartment because she donates most of her salary back to research. I saw someone who spends weekends volunteering at marine animal rescues. I saw someone who turned down a six-figure job because it would have meant abandoning the work that actually matters." "You make me sound like a saint," Victoria said, uncomfortable with the praise. "I am just doing what feels right." "Exactly," Julian said. "And that is incredibly rare. A moment of connection." They sat on a bench overlooking the ocean as the sun completed its descent. The first stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Victoria felt something shifting inside her, a wall she had not even realized she had built beginning to crack. "Can I ask you something personal?" she said. "After everything I just told you, I think we are past the point of impersonal questions," Julian replied with a slight smile. "Have you ever been in love? Real love, not business relationships or superficial dating?" Julian was quiet for a long moment. "Once, I was 25. Her name was Rachel. She was a journalist. I thought she loved me for who I was. Then I discovered she was writing an exposé on my company, using information I had shared with her in confidence. The article nearly destroyed everything I had built." "That is horrible," Victoria said. "It taught me to be careful," Julian said, "to protect myself. But somewhere along the way, I think I stopped being a person and became just a fortress." He looked at her. "Until I read about your work and thought maybe there is someone out there who still believes in something beyond themselves." Victoria felt her heart beating faster. The air between them seemed charged with possibility. "Julian, if I say yes to this, I need to know it will not just be a cold business arrangement. I need to know there is room for something real to develop." "That is exactly what I am hoping for," Julian said softly. "I am not asking you to love me, Victoria. I am asking you to give us a chance to discover if we could." The decision. They drove back to the research center in comfortable silence. When Julian pulled up to the entrance, he did not turn off the engine. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. "Before you decide, I want you to have this," he said, opening the box. Inside was a ring, not a massive diamond designed to impress, but a simple platinum band with a small sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds arranged to look like water droplets. "It was my mother's," Julian said. "The only piece of jewelry she ever owned. My father gave it to her when they were young and poor and dreaming of better days. I want you to have it, whether you accept my proposal or not, because in just 2 days, you have reminded me what it means to care about something beyond profit margins." Victoria took the box with trembling hands. The ring was beautiful in its simplicity, made precious not by its monetary value but by its history, its meaning. "I need one more night to think," she whispered. "Take all the time you need," Julian said. "But Victoria, know this. Whatever you decide, I am grateful for these 2 days. You have already changed something in me." As Victoria walked into the research center, clutching the ring box, she felt tears streaming down her face. Maria found her sitting in the dark office, the box open on her desk, the ring catching the moonlight from the window. "You are going to say yes," Maria said gently. It was not a question. "Am I insane?" Victoria asked. "No," Maria said, sitting beside her. "You are taking a leap of faith, and sometimes that is the bravest thing we can do." That night, Victoria stood on the dock behind the research center, watching the waves roll in. She thought of her father, of his dedication to the ocean. She thought of Julian, of the pain and purpose driving him. She thought of the 12 families depending on her decision. But mostly, she thought of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, 2 broken people could build something whole together. She pulled out her phone and typed a message. Just 3 words. "My answer is yes." The response came immediately. "I will make you a promise, Victoria. You will never regret this." As she slipped her mother's ring onto her finger, Victoria whispered to the ocean, "Dad, I hope you understand. I am doing this for your dream, but maybe, just maybe, I am doing it for mine, too." The wedding took place 2 weeks later in a small chapel overlooking the ocean. Victoria had insisted on something intimate, not the grand society event Julian's publicist had suggested. Only 20 people attended. Maria and the research center staff, Dr. Lowell from Briar Bay, Julian's business partner and closest friend, and a handful of people who truly mattered. Victoria wore a simple cream-colored dress that fell to her knees, with her auburn hair swept up in a loose arrangement. She carried a bouquet of white roses and sea lavender. As she walked down the short aisle, her eyes found Julian standing at the altar in a dark blue suit that matched the ocean beyond the windows. His expression when he saw her made her breath catch. It was not the controlled businessman she had met in the restaurant. His eyes were soft, vulnerable, filled with something that looked like wonder. The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows, the exchange of rings. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Julian leaned in slowly, giving Victoria time to pull away if she wanted. She did not. Their first kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, but it sent warmth flooding through her entire body. The small reception was held at a nearby restaurant. There were no elaborate speeches or choreographed dances, just good food, quiet laughter, and the feeling that something significant had shifted in the universe. As the sun set over the Pacific, Julian found Victoria standing alone on the terrace, looking out at the water. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly, coming to stand beside her. "No," Victoria said honestly. "Just wondering what comes next." Julian took her hand, his thumb tracing small circles on her palm. "Whatever we decide comes next. Together, building a partnership. The first month of marriage was an adjustment. Julian had given Victoria a suite of rooms in his cliffside home, a stunning modern structure with walls of glass overlooking the ocean. Her space included a bedroom, office, and private terrace. But despite the generous accommodation, Victoria felt like a guest in a museum. Julian traveled constantly for business. When he was home, they had dinner together, discussing their respective work. The conversations were intellectually stimulating. Julian was brilliant, asking questions about marine ecosystems that showed genuine interest. But there was always a distance, a careful politeness that felt like walking on glass. 3 weeks into the marriage, Victoria made a decision. She waited until Julian returned from a trip to Portland, then met him at the door. "We need to talk," she said. Something flickered across his face. Fear, perhaps. All right. They sat in the living room, the ocean crashing against the cliffs below. Victoria took a deep breath. "This is not working," she said, and watched Julian's face go pale. "Wait, let me finish. The separate lives thing is not working. We are living like polite strangers. If this marriage is going to mean anything, even as a partnership, we need to actually be partners." Julian relaxed slightly. "What do you suggest?" "Start by having breakfast together. Not just dinner when our schedules align. Real mornings, coffee, conversation. Let me see the work you are doing. Take me to your business meetings when appropriate. Let me understand your world, and I will share mine with you." A slow smile spread across Julian's face. "You want to be involved?" "I want this to be real," Victoria said. "As real as we can make it." The Ocean Project, 2 months into their marriage, Julian brought Victoria to Westbrook Industries headquarters for a major presentation. The boardroom was filled with executives, engineers, and environmental consultants. Julian stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding attention. "Gentlemen and ladies, I want to introduce you to a project that will define the next decade of our company," he began. "We are going to build the world's first large-scale wave energy farm combined with an active coral reef restoration system." The room erupted in murmurs. Julian brought up holographic displays showing underwater turbines designed to capture wave energy while creating artificial structures for coral growth. "This is where Victoria comes in," Julian said, gesturing to her. "Her research on coral resilience in varying pH levels is the foundation of this project. The energy farm will not just generate power. It will actively heal the ocean ecosystem around it." Victoria stood, her heart racing. She had worked with Julian on the preliminary designs for weeks, but seeing it presented to the full board made it real. She walked through the biological aspects, explaining how the artificial structures would be seeded with coral larvae, how the energy generation would create current patterns that mimicked natural reef systems. This could restore hundreds of acres of damaged reef while providing clean energy to coastal communities, she concluded. One of the senior executives, a stern man named Gerald, leaned forward. "This will cost 3 times what a standard wave farm would cost. What is the business justification?" Julian's expression hardened slightly. "The business justification is that we live on a planet that is dying. Every project we undertake should leave the world better than we found it. If we are only here to maximize quarterly profits, then we have failed at everything that matters." The room went silent. Then Dr. Lowell, who Julian had invited as a consultant, spoke up. "I have reviewed Dr. Hayes's research extensively. This project is not just viable, it could be revolutionary. 5 years from now, every coastal energy project will be trying to replicate what we do here first." The board approved the project with a narrow vote. As people filed out, Gerald stopped beside Victoria. "You have quite the champion in your husband," he said. "He normally does not fight the board this hard unless something matters deeply to him." Victoria watched Julian across the room, talking animatedly with the engineering team. Her husband. The word still felt strange, but increasingly it felt right. 4 months into their marriage, Victoria was leading a research expedition to survey potential sites for the wave energy farm. The team included Thomas from her research center and 3 engineers from Westbrook Industries. They were on a company vessel, collecting water samples and mapping the ocean floor. The weather forecast had called for clear skies, but the Pacific was unpredictable. Dark clouds rolled in with alarming speed. The captain, an experienced sailor named Rodriguez, immediately turned the boat toward shore. "We need to secure everything," he shouted over the rising wind. "Storm coming in fast." Victoria helped tie down equipment as the waves grew larger. The boat pitched violently. One of the engineers, a young man named Peter, lost his balance near the railing. Victoria lunged for him, grabbing his arm and pulling him back from the edge, but in doing so, she lost her own footing. The boat tilted sharply on a massive wave, and Victoria felt herself sliding toward the churning water. Her hand caught a rope, but the wet fibers burned through her palm as she tried to hold on. Then Thomas was there, gripping her arm. "I have got you." They hauled her back onto the deck. Rodriguez managed to steer them into a protected cove where they waited out the worst of the storm. Victoria sat below deck, shaking from cold and adrenaline, her hand wrapped in a makeshift bandage. Her phone buzzed constantly. Julian calling again and again. She finally answered. "Victoria, I have been trying to reach you for an hour. Are you all right? I heard there was a storm." "I am fine," she said, her voice shakier than she intended. "We are in a cove waiting it out." "Where?" "I am coming to get you." "Julian, you do not need to. Tell me where you are." His voice left no room for argument. The revelation, by the time they made it back to shore 2 hours later, Julian was waiting at the dock. He looked like he had aged 10 years, his face drawn with worry. The moment Victoria stepped off the boat, he strode forward and pulled her into his arms. "Do not ever do that to me again," he said roughly against her hair. "When Rodriguez radioed that you were in trouble, I thought—" His voice broke. Victoria pulled back to look at his face. His eyes were red-rimmed. "He had been crying, Julian," she said softly. "I am all right." "You are not fine," he said, his hands running over her as if checking for injuries. He saw the bandaged hand. "You are hurt. Just a rope burn." "Julian, what is happening? Why are you so upset?" He looked at her with an expression that made her heart stop. "Because I cannot lose you. Because somewhere in the last 4 months, this stopped being a contract and became the most important thing in my life. The world seemed to hold its breath." "What are you saying?" "I am saying I love you," Julian said, his voice fierce. "I know that was not part of the agreement. I know we said this was a partnership, a business arrangement. But Victoria, I wake up thinking about you. I come home hoping you will be there. When I heard you were in danger, I felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest." Tears streamed down Victoria's face. "You love me?" "Completely, utterly, terrifyingly." He cupped her face in his hands. "I understand if you do not feel the same way. The contract still stands. I will never use this against you or make you uncomfortable. But I needed you to know. I needed to be honest." Victoria laughed through her tears. "You brilliant, impossible man. I have been in love with you since you showed me that ring and told me about your mother. I was just too afraid to admit it." Julian's eyes widened. "You love me?" "Yes," Victoria said. "I love your passion for making the world better. I love how you remember everyone's name. I love how you get excited about reef ecosystems and renewable energy. I love the way you look at the ocean like it holds all the answers. I love you, Julian Westbrook." He kissed her then, not the careful kiss from their wedding, but a kiss that spoke of months of restrained feeling finally set free. Around them, the research team cheered, but Victoria barely heard them. Her entire world had narrowed to this moment, this man, this impossible, beautiful beginning, a new chapter. 6 months later, Victoria stood on the deck of a ship watching the first turbines of the wave energy farm being lowered into position. Julian stood beside her, his arm around her waist, her head resting on his shoulder. The project was ahead of schedule. The coral seeding had already begun. Marine biologists from around the world had requested to collaborate. 3 other coastal cities had reached out about similar projects. "We are changing the world," Julian murmured. "We are," Victoria agreed. Together. That night, they returned to the cliffside house that now felt like home. They had merged their spaces, turning the separate suites into one shared sanctuary. Victoria's research books mingled with Julian's business volumes. Her marine biology specimens shared shelves with his renewable energy models. They sat on the terrace, wrapped in a blanket, watching stars reflect on the dark water. "Do you ever regret it?" Julian asked. "Saying yes to a stranger's proposal?" Victoria thought about the question seriously. She thought about the fear, the uncertainty, the leap of faith. She thought about discovering who Julian really was beneath the billionaire facade. She thought about learning to love him, slowly and then all at once. "No," she said finally. "That night changed everything, but not the way anyone would expect. It gave me you. It gave us this. It gave the world a chance to heal." Julian pulled her closer. "You know what the best part is?" "What?" "We still have 2.5 years left on the contract," he said with a smile. And then we get to choose to stay together, not because we have to, but because we want to. Victoria laughed. I think I can promise you I'm not going anywhere. Good, Julian said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Because I have about 100 more ocean restoration projects planned, and I need my brilliant wife to make them happen. Your wife, Victoria repeated softly. I like the sound of that. Above them, the stars wheeled through the sky. Below them, the ocean sang its eternal song. And between them, love grew, stronger than any contract, deeper than any ocean, as infinite as the horizon stretching before them. Their story had begun with a whispered proposal and a night that changed everything. But it would continue for years to come, written in coral reefs restored, in clean energy generated, in lives touched, and in two hearts that had found their home in each other. The billionaire had whispered words that night at the restaurant, words that seemed like a warning. But what he did next, what they built together, changed not just their lives, but the world around them. And that was the greatest love story of all, the end.